5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Counting live.
Good morning. Just don't know what to say. I'm blushing. So I'm going to start off a little different this morning. I actually ran across a website the other day, and it had this place on the website where parents could post notes that their kids had written. And I just thought they were funny, and that they said something about the kind of pre-programming that children seem to be born with. So let me just put those up there for you. This one says, "I am running away because you think I farted when I didn't. P.S. You are mean." What's that kid thinking? Next one. This is a brother writing a letter to his sister. "Dear Valerie, get out of my life." Oh, I don't even know what to say. I mean, that kid's got some issues, right? Next. This one's kind of sweet. "I'm angry at you, and I'm not talking to you today and tomorrow. P.S. all day. P.S.S. I still love you." I like that kid. And this one I found in Larry's treasure box. He asked me to watch his cats. I found this at his house. Anyway, "Dear God, maybe Cain and Abel would not kill each other so much if they had their own rooms. It works with my brothers. Larry." That one's especially appropriate because we're looking at another one of those, what's the word that Larry used? Primordial stories from the Bible. This one is the story of Cain and Abel. And there are so many things that you can take away from this story, so much wisdom, that I really had a difficult time deciding what I would actually land on today. So I hope that it's helpful. If you want to see more, I think Evan mentioned this, but we do podcast the sermon prep for this series because this stuff is so deep and meaningful. So you might want to check that out on the website. A couple of weeks ago, when we started this series, Pastor Larry told us that these stories are really, really important. And one of the reasons he said they're important is because these stories are our stories. They're our stories. These stories are written with a lot of figurative language. They're meant to express universal truths that apply to everybody across time and culture. And this is why it can be so difficult to extract the wisdom that it's trying to convey if I'm going to look at it literally. It's not that you can't do that, but it is definitely going to be more difficult. You see, it's like this. If I'm looking at these stories as though they're historic accounts about specific people in history, then it's a lot easier for me to disassociate with them. I mean, think about it. These characters are so extreme. And so if they were real people, it would be very hard to relate to them as real people because they do all these weird things. They're culturally weird. They say weird things. They're almost bipolar in their extreme behavior. And so it can be difficult to try to associate yourself with these characters otherwise. And that's really what's meant to happen when you go to these stories. It's to place your feet in their sandals and to learn something about yourself, about people in general, but about yourself specifically. So when I take them literally, I also find myself thinking, well, this is not only weird, it's like I almost have to walk away going, what was God thinking? What, is he a moron? For example, you put the tree that you told him not to eat from right in the center of the garden? What's up? Not only that, you put the serpent You let the serpent in. What's going on? You see what I mean? But these stories are so important, and I hope you're hearing that. Here's the first point that I want you to remember. Hello, world. The first point I want you to remember, you can fill it in, and you can fill it in if you want. It's in your notes there. The Bible stories are about me. In my defense, I don't usually have to turn that on. So I didn't think of that, however. So like I said, the value of these stories really comes out when I'm willing to place my feet in their shoes and see my potential in their thoughts and in their actions. So these stories are about me. That's why their names, even their names, have this archetypal quality to them. They're generalized symbols. Their names are generalized symbols with story-specific purpose. For example, we learned that Adam means ground. He was, remember, shaped from the ground in the story. Adama. And Adam means man. Adam, man. So Adam is us, humanity. Cain, in this story, means spear. It's rooted in another word, kun, that means to chant a dirge. Makes sense if you know the story of Cain and Abel. And then it also has this play on words. You can look this up for yourselves. I know this sounds really elaborate, but it's fascinating stuff. It also has this play on another word, kana, which is to acquire, to get, to receive. Abel, on the other hand, is like an opposite. His means emptiness, transitory, impermanent. So I want to encourage you to keep these things in mind when you go to these stories, whether on your own or when you hear them here, because there's just so much more that can be derived from the stories if you do. So let's look at chapter 4. Adam made love to his wife Eve. It's good so far. And she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Good listener. First off, what I want to point out here is that this is the second time that sacrifice shows up in the Bible. And the question is, why is sacrifice so important? Why does it play such a central role throughout the biblical text? Well, we all understand as adults, and it almost seems like an innate understanding at this point in our lives, that sacrifice is a good thing. It has to do with the value of delaying gratification, sacrificing something today so that I have something for tomorrow. I'm trying to secure a better tomorrow. But you know, this idea had to start off somewhere. We know from children that that is not an automatic thing. It's not innate, that understanding. They seem to think, you know, there's a famous experiment. They seem to think that they should just have what they want now, or what they need now. So they have a huge sense of entitlement. All the universe is swirling around their heads, you know. And that's normal. But somewhere along the line in human evolution, something happened. And I wrote a little script. Let's see what you think. You can imagine, let's take ourselves back to 100,000 BC. Gerdoc and the boys managed to kill a mammoth. Gerdoc says, "It's a good day, boys. It's a good day for most of us. Too bad that Bosku died in the process, but his wife's going to be kind of disappointed. But I did tell him not to stand on the downhill side of the mammoth when we're killing it. So that's his own fault." Uzgok says, I don't know where I got these names from, so they're caveman names, you know. Uzgok says, "Oh, I told him to stop standing there too, but it's okay. I know his wife's going to be disappointed, but I have room in my cave for another wife." Gerdoc says, "Yeah, you know what you ought to do? You ought to bring some of this mammoth," as they're gorging themselves. "You ought to bring some of this mammoth back to her. What's her name again? Something weird. Nancy, that's it, Nancy. Bring some of this mammoth back to Nancy." "Yeah, that's a good idea," Uzgok says. "Well, you know, the fact is the last hunt didn't go very well. We only ended up with one porcupine, and that only goes so far among the tribe, you know, and so turns out that was Uzgok's, that was his fault. So, yeah, I imagine that Nancy's pretty hungry. So, yeah, that's a good idea." And then Gerdoc says, "Wait a berry-picking moment." Maybe I should have said berry-gathering moment, you know, hunters and gatherers. He says, "Wait a berry-picking moment. Instead of gorging ourselves and leaving the rest here for the spear-tooth and the wolf, let's cut it all off and take it back to camp. We'll save some of it. And that way, if we have a bad hunt again, like the porcupine day, we'll have something to eat." "Genius," Uzgok says. "Genius." And poor Lord Aki hasn't said a thing. He's standing back there, and he just goes, "You know, I said this months ago, guys. Nobody hears me." That's me in the story. Nobody hears me. Okay, so maybe I won't use that story in the next service. But here's the point. When something goes really well for humanity, something happens pretty quickly. When something helps us to survive or to even thrive in this world that we live in, we tend to sacramentalize that thing. We make it holy because it etches it into our memories. We ritualize it because it etches it into our memories, and it's something that we can pass down to others as time goes on. What's so important about the sacrifice in this particular story, though, is how it expresses the feelings that people experience when you've given all you've got, you've done what you think is the right thing to do, you've made the proper sacrifices, and the future that comes about is not at all what you were expecting. Very disappointing. We like to think that our offerings to God will sway him to our benefit. All of us have been there at some point. Maybe you're still there in your thinking. But here's the fact, guys. Religious sacrifice is a principle that extols the value of sacrifice, of delayed gratification. It is not a tool that I use to manipulate the God of the universe. I mean, if you just stop and think about that for a minute, how ridiculous a notion is that? It's not there to manipulate God or to obligate him to do what I think is best. I'm not on the throne. He is. Now, I said a minute ago that the value of these stories comes out when you put your feet in their shoes. But if you read on in this story, you may feel like, how can I relate to Cain? In fact, I had somebody ask me that last night. How in the world can I relate to this guy? His behavior is so extreme that I already said there's a reason for that. So maybe Jesus can give us some perspective. So this is from Matthew chapter 5. He says this, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder.'" Okay, I got that one covered. "Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." What? What did he say? Yeah. No, he didn't say that. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raka." Oh, good, I never call anybody Raka. But all that is it's a term of contempt. That person is answerable to the Sanhedrin, or the court. Then he goes on, he says, anyone who says, you fool, moros. It's the word that we get the word moron from. But it means more than that. Moros means a godless moron. Someone who God doesn't even pay attention to because he's such a moron. A condemnable fool. Jesus says that person will be in danger of the fire of hell. The one who calls someone a moros is in danger of the fire of hell. Ever call someone a fool? Ever think it? Maybe something worse? Can you relate now to where this story is going with this extreme behavior? See, there's a part of me that I don't like. There's a part of me that I don't want to share publicly. There's a part of me that I would just as soon ignore altogether. The problem is that to the degree that I ignore that shady side of me, to that same degree, I will surrender control of my own life to that shady side. So this is the second point. Whatever remains hidden inside will influence my life on the outside. In this story, God tries to encourage Cain to contemplate his feelings. Why are you feeling the way that you're feeling? Why is your face downcast? Really think about it. This is stuff that you lose in the English translation, but he's asking him to contemplate why it is that he feels the way that he feels. And then he warns him about the insidious way that these feelings can grow and fester. Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have the control. But you must control it. But you have to be aware of it if that's going to be the case. Yeah, you may never murder someone, you can hear Jesus saying, but the seeds of potential are still there. Maybe you only see it in its subtle forms, like terms of contempt, calling someone a moros. But given the right circumstances, make no mistake, you might find yourself doing things, thinking things that you would have judged as repugnant. It was common for young Nazi soldiers to get sick when they had to first perform executions for the SS. Over time, they got used to it. Psychoanalysts today, they'll tell you that if you think that you're not capable of things like that, well, I just pray that you're never put in the position that those young soldiers were put in. Their circumstances condemned them to do something that they would have otherwise called barbaric. Carl Jung put it this way: until you make the conscious, actually I think there's until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. There's no question about that, guys. That's been tested and tested and tested and tested throughout the last 100 years since Freud started his whole psychoanalytical methods and theories. But we don't even have to know that. We can just go to the Bible. Jesus says it this way. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. This is so important, this verse. And it's one that most people have no idea it's even there because it's in the shadow of John 3:16, see? But look what it says. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God, that nothing will be hidden. Nothing. So you might as well pull it out into the light. You might as well expose it. That's the healthy way. So, back to the story. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" It's a good question for any of us to ask. Am I my brother's keeper? Again, Jesus can help us answer that question. I tell you the truth, whatever you did for the least of these, or whatever you didn't do for the least of these, you did or didn't do for me. That's the paraphrase. So yes, the answer to that question, yes, I am my brother's keeper. So the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, driven from Adamah, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you're driving me from the land, and I'll be hidden from your presence. I'll be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." But the Lord said to him, "Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. You notice he takes no responsibility for what he's done. He's that far gone. He's that far converted to the shadow in his life. He's that bitter. This just seems to him that it's all fate. He's a victim of fate. He started off, "I gave a sacrifice. I put up the offering here. I should get what is coming to me." Remember his name. I should get that. Instead, when he doesn't get what he thinks he deserves, he lets those feelings fester and he murders Abel, the empty one, the one who understands this reality better and is empty in the sense that he doesn't have these expectations. He sees reality better than Cain does. But you notice that how God responds to Cain? It's really amazing. This is the third point. God always gives his best. And he gave his best to Cain. But this is the important thing to remember, that my choices can determine what God's best will be. You follow? I'm a father of 5 kids. I knew better what my kids needed than they did. Hands down. And if they did things that required correction, then their mom and I would correct them. And they did not see that as the best thing. We can all relate to that. But nevertheless, it was the best thing for them. When I was 4 years old, I got strep throat. Maybe I was 5, actually. My wife said to me this morning, "Hey, you told that story you were 4 that you wrote a note. Most 4-year-olds can't write." So, I'm smart. But maybe I was 5. So I got strep throat, and she says, she took my temperature, and she said, "We got to go see Dr. Bruns." Oh, no, I don't want to go see Dr. Bruns. I hate that guy. Besides, I just got my Legos out. She said, "No, we got to go. You can play with your Legos when we get back." And she looked a little worried, so all right. So we got in the car, and we went there, and the first thing the guy does, he comes in, he takes out this long stick with a swab on the end of it, and he sticks it down my throat. You know, I'm a little kid. I'm like, what is he doing to me? I'm gagging, you know. He's trying to get a culture. I didn't know. So that was pleasant. And he leaves the room then. And so I'm just sitting there. I have nothing to do. They didn't like put toys in there and stuff back then, you know. So I'm just sitting there with my own mind's eye, staring into the abyss of the unknown. Like, what's he going to do to me? And all the while, mind you, there's this kid in some other room screaming like he's literally being tortured. Okay, so I'm sitting there going, what's going on? You know? And then finally the screaming stops. I'm like, I wonder what happened to him. And then the door to my cell, the door to my to my room. That's what it seemed like to me. The door to my room opens up, and here comes my torturer. And he has in his hand this freakishly large, kind of like a needle. It was pink, had all this pink stuff in it. But I had shots. I had to have my shots, you know. So I knew what those were. And this was not a shot. This was like a gun, because I could see down the barrel of that needle. So I'm thinking, I'm not going to make it out of here. Look at that thing. He's going to torture me. So I look at my mom. I give her a glance and I think in my mind, I'm sending a message to her like, get the door. So I jump down off the table, and I go running for the door. And instead of Mom opening the door, she just has this blank stare on her face. It's not even like a stare of concern or anything. She just is like determined. And she picks me up and places me back on the table. And as she's doing that, Bruns is in the background going, pull down his britches and lay him down face down. What? And she does it. I'm thinking, at two, Mommy? Oh, the betrayal, right? So she's holding me down. I'm like, I'm alone here. I'm screaming and thrashing at this point. Now I know what was happening to that kid. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of all that screaming and crying, my mom lets go of my shoulders and she pats me on my bare butt. You know, what was that about? And then they're laughing. And I thought, it converted my fear into rage. I was like, you're laughing at me? This is funny to you? And then all of a sudden, Brun says, all right, buddy, you're all done. I didn't even feel the shot. But man, I was angry. I didn't talk to my mom for the rest of the day. In fact, I got to be so nasty that I was playing with my Legos, and she said, put those Legos away. I'm not going to have you talking to me like that. You're going to bed early. Oh, now I'm even more angry. So I wrote a note of my own. I don't have it to put up here, but I remember it, at least most of it. So this I definitely remember. I wrote, Mom. And then I got a red crayon, and I X'd out Mom. And then I picked up my black crayon, and I wrote Denise. I am not your son now. Me and Roman runned away. That's our dog. That was our dog. I taped my Legos. I did. I put them in a little black suitcase. I think they're still in there to this day. A little black suitcase. I taped my Legos. Bye, and I remember this too. Bye for never. Brett. See, I was on the bitter train of Cain. That's what I call it, the bitter train of Cain. I was going to a bad place. Jordan Peterson, the psychoanalyst, he's the professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. You've probably heard us bring him up before. He's famous on YouTube right now. He points this out. It's something really interesting because he does this whole biblical series where he goes through the stories of the Bible for their psychological value. And he said this about Cain and Abel. He said they can be seen as two sides of the same psyche coin. In which case, Cain killing Abel represents us, our bitter side, our shadow, destroying our potential. But here's the good news. We have freedom to choose differently. We don't have to take the bitter train of Cain. We don't need to do that. It is true, all of us can attest to this fact, that life can be very arbitrary. And guys, that's why these stories like this one, and especially Job, depict God that way. They're wrestling with, what is God like? Well, this is what life is like, so that must be what he's like. He's arbitrary. And so they paint that picture of God. I mean, thank God that Jesus came to show us what God is really like. But in these stories, they're wrestling with what they think God is like, and so they make him out like he's arbitrary. Because life is like that. Stuff just happens. Injustices occur. It's like, why do these things happen to me? I tithe. I volunteer for Little League. I do all the things that I think are the right things to do. Why am I in this situation, God? Maybe I should just blame God. I mean, at the very least, the reality that I'm suffering in, you made. You made the system. So why shouldn't I blame you? It's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. And let's say in this case that I really didn't. That's not usually true, but let's say I didn't do anything wrong. It's really not my fault, and I'm suffering anyway. What gives? Why not blame you? Here's why. Listen carefully. If you lose everything else that I said today, don't lose this. We know from human history and all the stories and myths that have come out of our collective thinking and experiences that kind of bitter thinking only leads to a more and more hellish reality. It just doesn't work. It makes things worse for me, and it makes things worse for everyone else. Don't do it. It's one of the ingenious lessons that we find in the Bible over and over again. The Jewish people, they were taught this from the beginning, and they stuck to it for the most part. No matter what we think God has done, we do not blame God. God is good. Some people might look at that and say it's naive. I look at that and I say it's genius. And the whole sermon could be preached on that alone, but I'll just leave that so that you guys can think about it. Do not blame God. Think about, where does that leave me? This I can say. It leaves you in the place of Nietzsche, who absolutely believed there was no God, and therefore everything in the end was meaningless. And so he lost all meaning to life. And as brilliant as he was, and he was brilliant, drove him insane, and he took his own life. I think that Nietzsche just didn't think quite hard enough about this topic. Life isn't fair, but here's the thing, it's going to be okay. And I believe God made the system, and I think that's why God seems to weave meaning into all those difficult times anyway. I am who I am because of those difficult times more than I am because of the good times. That's just the truth for me. You can analyze your own life, but I'd be willing to bet it's true for you as well. There was nothing just about the cross that Jesus willingly endured, was there? So why did he do it? There's a whole list of noble reasons why Jesus went to the cross. But one of them was to provide an example of someone who lives and dies by the courage of his convictions. And it's a good example to follow. In fact, he tells his disciples then, and he's telling us today, to do the same. To take up our own cross, and in the courage of our convictions, in faith, follow him, trusting, no matter what life throws at us, no matter how I may fail, no matter how I may succeed, trusting that God is good. Let's pray together. Father, we admit that within each of us lies the potential of Cain and of Abel. We thank you for the wisdom given throughout the scriptures that guide us to come into the light where our shadows are revealed and our souls find rest. Grant us, Lord, the courage to mindfully walk that narrow road that Jesus spoke of, because that's the road that leads to wholeness. We ask it in his name. Amen. If you'll stand, I'd like to finish up the story of my penicillin shot. Remind you that, so much meaning there. And remind you that if you have something you'd like to pray with someone about, there are people up front here that would be happy to pray with you after service. So, the day after I got that shot, I didn't run away that night. I got tired and I fell asleep. I did pack up some things, my Legos, but I fell asleep. And I woke up and I felt so much better. In fact, I felt so good that I had forgotten the trauma from yesterday and the betrayal. And so I heard Mom cooking in the kitchen, and I was hungry. So I ran out there to the kitchen, and I said, "Mommy, I feel so much better." And she said, "I knew you would. I know you hate going to Dr. Brunn's. I understand that, honey. But I also knew that that pink stuff was going to make you feel better." I said, "Yeah." And I remember this. I remember thinking, "Mom, my mom loves me." And I said to her, "Thanks for helping me, but I'm glad that I was brave enough to get the pink shot because I feel a lot better." And I said, "I'm going to go play with my Legos now." And I did. So as you leave this place, understand that all the difficulties in life that we face can be, and very, very often are, infused with meaning that God gives them, if we'll be open to that reality. So go in His peace, serve in His love, and thanks for being here today.